It is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and John Meoli live on a Friday in December, the day after Christmas Day, to bring you a special episode. John and I are in two different places, back with our families for Christmas. I promised an episode on Tuesday, but unfortunately, I got what seems to be going around, which is some level of sickness, some level of flu or illness. I have fought it off. I am feeling better. That was my Christmas. John, how was your Christmas?
Christmas is great. Our daughter came down with the flu on like Monday afternoon. I picked her up from school and we were walking back in the stroller, like not a long walk, and she fell asleep in it, which is usually not a thing that happens, and it was kind of
Okay.
concerning. But little bit of flu impacted travel plans. Didn't impact Christmas that much. Santa still came. It was still
Nice.
magical. She said at one point that Santa was making all her dreams come true, which is really all you want from your life and in that moment. So that was good. And I just drove from Baltimore out to the east end of Long Island. So I'm ready to go. You've gotten me on like little sleep. You've gotten me on a lot of different life circumstances. But like if ever I was going to say something I don't want to say into a microphone, it might happen right now. Let's get into it.
Oh boy, we got you at the best possible time. Terrific.
Yeah, Punchy John.
Well, we haven't had you on since the Orioles traded for Shane Baz, because I had Kyle Goon on last Friday to break down that move when it happened. The Orioles sending 4 prospects and a draft pick to their division foes, the Rays, in order to get the 3 years of team control for the 26-year-old right-hander. John, we're going to talk about trade candidates later on in the show because the Orioles still do have some powder dry to trade away, despite the fact that they sent 4 players and a pick out for Shane Baz. But let's get your thoughts first on the Shane Baz deal, because I think a lot of Orioles fans saw that and said, whoa, that's a lot of players. Shane Baz is talented. Sure, he throws 97. He has a great knuckle curve. He's one of the former top prospects in the game. But boy, is that a lot to give up. What was your thought when you saw the Shane Baz deal go down?
Yeah, I think it was a lot to give up, but I think it was in areas that they were able to do that. You know what I'm saying? Oh my gosh, I'm seeing my backpack over my shoulder here. How sloppy. I'll do something about that very shortly. I think the way that they went about this was, I think identifying areas where they had depth to trade from and doing so. They also, if this was a lot to people for Shane Baz, then you have to multiply it by like 2 to get like somebody who's proven or better or something like that. Like this is a good matchup. And the way I understand, there's teams like that, teams kind of like dealing with the Rays because they say like, okay, here's the guys that you can pick from, and if you pick, if you satisfy our requirements from this group of players that we're talking about, like we can make this trade. Like that's a pretty easy thing to do. And the Orioles probably got that list and thought, Michael Ferret, we really like him a lot. Is he somebody that is irreplaceable? Maybe individually he is different than Trey Gibson, different than Luis De Leon, different than Esteban Mejia. But is he someone that they will have no pitching if they trade Michael Ferret? No. Will they have no outfielders if they trade Austin O'Vernon and Slater DeBrun? No. Will they have no catchers if they trade Caden Bonine? No. So you think about that and the depth they built for this purpose, I might add, to say, in June, July, they were saying, we're going to get all these prospects and we're going to reload. That was what they did this for. So to have the opportunity to trade him for a pitcher who is basically like a more reliable Grayson Rodriguez, I think you just do it.
Yeah, that's the obvious comp here, because both of these pitchers, right-handers who are 26 years old, who have had injuries in their past. One of them has had Tommy John, Shane Baz. The other one has not, but the other one is Grayson Rodriguez and has dealt with plenty of injuries and has not pitched since midway through the 2024 season. And I think a lot of Orioles fans saw the deal for Grayson Rodriguez that brought back Taylor Ward, and they said, we sent out 4 prospects and a draft pick for Shane Baz, and a comparable player we sent out and all we got was Taylor Ward. Like, do you think that the delta between, and that's not to diminish Taylor Ward's talent. He certainly is a power hitter. He certainly fits this lineup very well as a right-handed hitting outfielder, but you're only getting 1 year of Taylor Ward. The difference in team control is Shane Baz is under team control for 3 years, Grayson Rodriguez for 4 years. Like, what is the difference in trade value from Shane Baz and Grayson Rodriguez, and is it that large?
No, it's not that large. I think there's a couple of I think you have to kind of make a couple of assumptions. Some of them are completely fair assumptions to make, and some of them are like wildly unfair speculations to make, and I'm going to do both. So buckle up. One is that Shane Baz is worth more to the Baltimore Orioles in 2026 than Grayson Rodriguez was going to be. Theoretically, could Shane Baz have a Grayson Rodriguez season and not pitch an inning this year? Sure, he can. But if you can reasonably expect him to pitch a full season to improve, given the changes and where his home park's going to be a little better. Not to say that the Rays don't do pitching well, but to be a little different, to develop better and be a different and more useful pitcher in 2026 than Grayson Rodriguez, who I might add the Orioles knew specifically they didn't know what they were going to get for him. So I think that's important to know. And then over the course of their careers, and like to put them in zooming out from 2026 and over the course of their club control, I think it's really that is hard to square. One of the things that's unfair is that most pitchers who throw really hard as starters eventually miss a lot of time through injury, and like maybe even all of them, most if not all of them, have Tommy John. Shane Baz has already had it. Not to say that he can't again. Tyler Wells had a revision. John Means had two. But if you suspect that Grayson Rodriguez, who hasn't had that yet, may at some point, then you're talking about something that's a little more palatable, and that now we're not talking about 4 years versus 3 years. Like if you said that you wouldn't, I guess the question is, would you have made this trade for 1 year of Taylor Ward? Kind of the same way that we lumped in, like if you flipped the Zach Eflin and Trevor Rogers trade, which is the thing we talked about a lot, and now I don't think it makes sense again, even though it did make sense, and now it doesn't again. Would you trade those 4 players for 1 year of Taylor Ward? Maybe not in a vacuum. Are the Baltimore Orioles a better team this year for having made the 2 trades that they did? 100%. Yes. Like, is that even debatable? And are the Orioles going to be worse in the future for having made those trades? Maybe, but materially so. But that's kind of the thing they're looking at. Like, say they hold on to all their prospects the same way they had 6 good infield prospects at one point. Gunnar Henderson, Jordan Westburg, Jackson Holliday, Connor Norby, Kobe Mayo, Joey Ortiz. If they never even traded Daryl Hernandez, if you have 6, 7 good infield prospects, you can only play so many of them. So let's say it's 3 years down the line, they don't make this trade, and pie in the sky, Nate George is still awesome, and Austin O'Verne figures out how to hit fastballs and can do that, and is all of a sudden like kind of an impactful all-around player. And Slater DeBrun turns into Corbin Carroll. That's fantastic, and there's still not a lot of places to play all those guys who do the same thing, basically. So You just kind of removing that issue later and getting more value. You could argue they're getting more value now. I don't think they are arguing this, but like to trade Slater DeBrun now, you're getting a lot of value, and he might turn into Corbin Carroll, and he might not, and you might not be able to make this trade, just as if you could have made it 2 years from now too.
Yeah, I mean, I think teams that are in a win now position understand that they could take a hit in the long term, and understand that they may have to trade guys who are not at the peak of their value, that they may have to trade guys when their value is lower than they would like it to be. Unless Grayson Rodriguez's career is over, completely done after this, the Orioles traded low. They sold low on Grayson Rodriguez because he is coming off a season which he did not pitch. And they may have bought high on Shane Baz because he is coming off a season in which, no, he wasn't awesome, but his underlying statistics are better, and he showed that he could be fully healthy for a full season. But when you're a winning team, you can't really worry about, am I really selling this guy at his peak value? Am I really buying this guy at his peak value? You just don't have the luxury of worrying about that because your timelines are different. Like, I thought about, if you take all of the Mike Elias trades, you put them in a spreadsheet, you have one column the guy's out, one column the guy's in, and you just calculate the WAR over the amount of team control, you'll get a number. That won't tell you the full picture. That won't tell you the full picture for any GM. because what matters is whether you win baseball games, not whether you win the trade based on WAR or based on batting average or home runs over the time period. If Shane Baz helps them win a World Series in 26 or 27 or 28, and Grayson Rodriguez might not have, that's all that matters. If Taylor Ward helps them win a World Series in 26, that's all that matters. So they may have to trade. They may have to sell low. They may have to buy high. They can't really worry about that as much as they should worry about winning games.
Yeah. And truthfully, these are the kinds of trades that you make when you kind of have to make them. Like, what are we talking about here? This is something that the Orioles didn't do and were rightfully, chastised for not doing. So to say, okay, like, I think this is actually like kind of part of what's happened this whole offseason and into, through this David Rubenstein ownership era, is that we're talking about, I guess, the right things now. It's not like, are they going to make these moves? It's like, did they make the right move? It wasn't for a year, are they going to spend money? They spent a lot of money. They just didn't spend it well, or over the course of, they added $150 million cumulatively in payroll and to a dozen players, most of whom didn't really help them do anything. Now they're adding $150 million, $55 million for one player, Pete Alonso, who will. So now it's, you can make these trades and you can say, did we make a good deal? Even as Corbin Burnes was basically carrying the Orioles rotation single-handedly through the 2024 season, he was the one guy that was left standing. He was the only reason that they had the chance that they did. They went out and got a capital D dude who was the stabilizing force in the rotation and pitched a gem in the playoffs, exactly what you got him for. Even throughout that season, they were looking at Joey Ortiz going off in Milwaukee and being like, oh man, did we make a mistake? And you know what? That was an easy thing to think when Joey Ortiz was having a good year. I don't think they thought that much this year when Joey Ortiz was like one of the worst offensive players in the league.
Yeah.
You can think that now, and we did this. We've done this with that trade. We've done it. I mean, to say we've gone for full circle on the Trevor Rogers trade would be, that would be an injustice to circles. We've gone around so many times that like, that's not even a real, like, it's not, we're just going to keep doing this and that's fine. And I think that they probably did as well. But I guess if you have like three doors, one door is to just continue to do nothing or continue to do what they were doing. Like, that probably wouldn't have been a very fun door. Door two is what they did, and you can explain it and you can see the logic to it, and you can also poke some real holes in it. And door three is like whatever a perfect scenario is. Is there a perfect scenario? If they had to give up 50% more on prospect value for 20% more of a pitcher, is that a good trade? Like, I don't think so. I don't know that they would have done that, to be fair. So I guess we're going to, and we'll kind of get into that, but it seems like a sweet spot of like, if this is a trade that's presented to you and available to you, it's a lot better than on some of the trades that, that might not exist and we could talk about.
Exactly. And we're going to get into some more trade candidates here real quick. We have heard from Mike Elias since the Shane Baz trade. He gave Shane Baz the ceiling of a top of the rotation starter. I still am of the belief, though, that the Orioles did not acquire him to start on opening day, maybe opening weekend, but I think that the Orioles acquired him to be a middle of the rotation guy. Maybe you're number 3 if you had to write up a rotation right now behind Bradish and Trevor Rogers, but probably a 3 or 4. And I still think that they are looking for a higher end starting pitcher. Do you agree?
Yes. I think this is kind of a sweet spot, and all these things kind of happen in a vacuum. But I believe before we the podcast that we did before this one, I was kind of like dumping on the mid-tier starting pitching free agency. One
of those, by the way, that I forgot about that I teased in that podcast was Lucas Giolito, and I think we can just get this out of the way. You would also dump him into the mid-tier free agent pool, right?
Yeah, but I think he would, for the right price. All these guys for the right price. Sure. But I think specifically for like the guys who were relievers is like, if that's the business you want to get into, like, get into it for yourself. Don't buy somebody else's converted reliever. But all that is to say that would have been, to even consider those guys as like, and now I think to even consider those guys as the potential, like this is the free agent pitcher the Orioles sign, felt weird to me because that meant that they would need to make a trade for a top end guy, because that would not be a pitcher who can slot in with Cal Bradish and Trevor Rogers, anyone we talked about last week. Basically, I don't think they would. I don't think they have the upside or like the ability to dominate to put themselves into that conversation. So, in that context, I think Shane Baz, like, if the Orioles now do want to sign Zach Littell and have him be like the innings eater, Dean Kramer companion in the second half, like the bottom half of the rotation, and you get some durability that you can count on, that's a little less. That's a little more palatable now because Shane Baz does have the upside. So, like, if they want to go out and sign Framber Valdez, they have a very overqualified number 4 now. Like,
Yeah.
Dean Kramer would become an overqualified number 5. I think this trade gives them a little bit more flexibility in what they can do going forward. Whereas if they ended up without a chair on like the Suarez, Valdez, Imai kind of top end guys, that would put a lot of pressure on them to make a trade in January. Whereas now they've already done something that can count as that if you wanted to. I'm not saying, I think they can honestly get a little bit of credit. And if they want to call him their front half addition, like, given this offseason, like signing a real closer, signing Pete Alonso, like making this team, I think they kind of would get the benefit of the doubt for that. But I don't think they would get the benefit of the doubt if they said, we are signing
Nick Martinez
as our front half guy. And because then everyone would look at it and be like, well, then they have to go trade for MacKenzie Gore. It's like,
right.
Sure, everybody has to technically trade for MacKenzie Gore if they can. But like now the Orioles don't have to because they have kind of checked this box before all the other pieces started moving.
Yeah, I think with Shane Baz, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder here. And it's clear that the Orioles were high on him, obviously. And maybe they do see him with that upside, but the Orioles have gotten bit in the butt by upside before. I mean, we were talking last offseason about, well, the Orioles didn't get a superior ace. They didn't get a guy for the top half of the rotation. They got a bunch of back-end guys, but Grayson Rodriguez has the upside to be the ace. And then things fell apart. So, things can fall apart based on upside. Let's talk about 11 starting pitcher candidates that the Orioles could trade for, because they still have a lot of guys that they can trade from. The 4 guys that they dealt away for Shane Baz, none of those guys were some of the prospects that they acquired at the deadline. Those were all recent draftees by this front office. They still have all the guys that they got at the deadline, all 16 or 19 or however many prospects those were. They still have Kobe Mayo, who doesn't really have a spot on this roster, despite what Mike Elias said about maybe we could find a spot for him in the corner outfield or DH or however. I still think Ryan Mountcastle, Kobe Mayo are guys that are going to need to find homes elsewhere. They still have Dylan Beavers if they want to trade him. They still have all of these guys, these prospects, these major leaguers, whatever you want to look at, as guys that they can deal away. Nate George, Boston Bateman, Enrique Bradfield Jr., Ike Irish. So they can still trade from this minor league depth. Let's talk about some of the guys they could get back. And I think I've broken it down into 3 categories, John. I think you like that kind of category system. Let's go. Buckets.
Johnny Buckets.
That's the way to do it. The first bucket is top end guys. The second bucket is rotation depth. And the third bucket is not entirely sure because those guys are kind of wild cards. Let's talk about the top end guys first. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 guys on this list. I have Tarek Skubal, Detroit Tigers ace. I've got Freddie Peralta of the Brewers, MacKenzie Gore of the Nationals, Joe Ryan of the Minnesota Twins. All 4 of these guys are going to be in 2026, between the ages of 27 and 30 years old. All 4 of these guys, I think you can qualify as capital A aces if you acquire them. Tarek Skubal seems like by far the biggest pie in the sky here. Jeff Passan, really, when he wrote about him in November, said there's really no consensus as to whether he's going to be traded. I still think it's going to be incredibly hard to pry Tarek Skubal, one of the best pitchers in all of baseball, away from the Tigers. So I think that one is pretty unlikely. Then you've got this group where Freddie Peralta, MacKenzie Gore, Joe Ryan. Freddie Peralta and Joe Ryan are very intriguing because they both were all-stars in 2025. They're both going to be just 30 years old. One has just 1 year of team control left. That's Freddie Peralta. And the other one has 2 years of team control left in Joe Ryan. And then MacKenzie Gore has been an ace in the past and looked like an ace for the first half of 2025. But then things fell apart after the All-Star break. Had a 3.02 ERA before the All-Star break and a 6.75 ERA after the All-Star break. So of those 4 guys in this bucket, who do you like the most?
I think Scooble is the best of them.
I think he's probably the best in this bucket. The shiniest shell.
Yeah. I mean, I think that as I look at what the Orioles have done in terms of trades, the prospect capital that would be required to make these trades, not to say there's a material difference in doing it like now versus in July, but I feel like they would be really limiting their ability to meaningfully help this team in season with whatever needs arise if they made a trade like this for any of these guys now. Now, do you need to trade for a starter if your rotation is Skubal, Bradish, Rogers, Baz, Kramer? No.
Hopefully not.
No, probably not. Are you?
Things would have to go pretty terribly.
Yeah, and then don't threaten me with a good time. I know what that looks like. We could talk about a rotation going terribly, but I think, I think that to make 2 huge trades, which this would be the second huge trade of this kind, would be it would be to put a lot into this one particular, like, this hand of poker, for lack of a better word. It's like you can bet a bit every single hand, but you can only bet a chip once. Either you win it or you can't lose it and then get it back again. They can't trade 10 prospects this winter and then feel great about their ability to add the way that they want to in July. And I think that, as we're talking about how things are meaningfully different, I think that is something that probably is a lesson not learned, but like it kept from the past few deadlines where they were adding and adding and adding, is that you only get one crack at this stuff. So if, say that the Tigers fall in love with, they want 5 Orioles prospects for Skubal, and you just do it. Sure, you do it. But any of these guys could also be held on to and like be traded at the deadline for similar, maybe less, maybe you're adding for more, maybe you're a little more convicted that you need them for 2 months, 3 months for a playoff run. I don't know. It feels like the upside of adding to them, for adding any of these guys, to me is a bit challenging in terms of like the outlay that it would take.
I think the one that has attracted a lot of Orioles fans is Freddie Peralta, because he fits a very similar mold to the Corbin Burnes mold. I mean, Corbin Burnes was a better pitcher by the time he was traded by the Brewers, but 1 year of team control. That Brewers team loves to trade guys who are entering their walk year. That's a Brewers team that was very good last year, so they'll probably want major league level talent. So you could be talking about a package that revolves around Kobe Mayo or maybe Dylan Beavers. So like that seems pretty doable. And if you trade for him, it seems like this version of the Mike Elias front office seems much more willing to hand out contracts, long-term contracts, than the one that traded for Corbin Burnes. So maybe you were able to trade for Freddie Peralta with 1 year of team control, entering his age 30 season, coming off an all-star season, which he had a 2.70 ERA and 33 starts, and then you extend him. There's a lot to like about somebody who has, made at least 30 starts in each of the last 3 seasons, has been quietly one of the better pitchers in all of baseball. So Freddie Peralta, to me, I think makes a lot of sense. MacKenzie Gore is intriguing, I think, in large part because of his upside, because of his age. Going to be entering his age 27 season. Had some shoulder inflammation in 2025 that kept him out of action. But he seems, of this group, maybe the most likely to be dealt, because that Nationals team is tearing things down to the studs. They are doing things over again from the very beginning with an incredibly young manager, an incredibly young general manager. So he feels maybe the most gettable because he is probably the most likely to be dealt. but I still do have some questions about how he closed out the 2025 season. So I'm just not entirely sure I'm surrendering the same kind of package for MacKenzie Gore that I would for, say, Freddie Peralta. And Joe Ryan makes just a ton of sense because there's 2 years of team control, over 10 Ks per nine, coming off an all-star season, had 171 innings pitched, just a very solid starter. And that Twins team tore down at the deadline. They might be willing to continue to tear down this offseason.
Yeah. And I want to add, I was listening and I was thinking about this as you were saying, like trading like major league ready-ish pieces. I think it's important to note that you're basically talking about the guys that are on the Orioles roster right now. There's no, I mean, other than, I'm trying to think in my head, other than the guys that are on the roster, like, I think on the hitting side specifically, like guys, when I say help, I'm not talking about like, come up for a week and sit on the bench and, and nobody feels terrible that you're there. I'm talking about like guys who can make a difference, like really support the major league team and like push this thing forward. In terms of hitters in the high minors, like there might not be any. And that's, Dylan Beavers is still rookie eligible, so he's a prospect technically. Samuel Basayo is still a rookie prospect eligible. The AAA season ended with like Judd Fabian on up there.
Enrique Bradfield.
Enrique Bradfield is basically it. Aaron Estrada is still in AA and is it. I don't know that he can help the Orioles like this year, but he is basically he and Enrique Bradfield are basically like the two. And I think you throw like, then we can talk about like Creed Willems if you want to get into that for a bit, which I don't on this holiday Friday.
Sorry, Creed.
Yeah, no, I love Creed Willems. I'm just not, he's not that kind of player. He's going to help someone. He's going to be a big leaguer. He's going to help someone at some point, but he's not somebody that you're trading. He's not somebody you're going to count for the Milwaukee Brewers, say, as a guy who can help them the way that Joey Ortiz immediately helped them and will help them for the rest of this decade because he's under club control for the whole decade. Like,
exactly.
There aren't those types of guys. So I think the Orioles' willingness to deal from that group, and I've been on team like it was a lot easier to say Brian Mountcastle and Cody Mayo can both stay when Pete Alonso didn't exist, or at least existed elsewhere. I don't know. Even now, the idea of them saying like, well, what are we going to do with them? It's like, the question is, what are they going to do without them? And the idea of adding a starting pitcher via trade with one of these players and like a rostered hitter, basically, is not a question of like, well, what are we going to do with them? It's like, well, what are we going to do without them? Like, God forbid, every bad thing known to man has happened to this team in the last 18 months. So they're going to sit here and be like, we're definitely not going to need 3 right-handed hitting corner.
Right.
They're not going to sit there and say that. They're just not.
Right.
Because they don't have a fourth. There's just no fourth.
No. All right. Next bucket, rotation depth guys. I have 3 guys in this bucket. I've got Mitch Keller for the Pittsburgh Pirates, Pablo Lopez from the Minnesota Twins, Edward Cabrera from the Miami Marlins. Cabrera, 28 years old. The Orioles have been connected to him, according to national reports, coming off a season which he had a 3.53 ERA over almost 10 Ks per nine. He's under team control through 2028. We know that Marlins team is always willing to deal major league pieces.
Always.
Pablo Lopez has been connected to the Orioles since the dawn of time. He is amazingly still somehow 30 years old, despite the fact that I feel like I've been talking about him for forever. 2023 All-Star, under team control through 2027. Had a phenomenal season statistics-wise this past year, 2.74 ERA, but only 75 innings pitched because he missed time with a hamstring strain, a right shoulder strain, and then most concerningly, a mild forearm strain in September. And then finally, Mitch Keller. We're talking about another team that likes to deal their major leaguers. 30 years old, of the Pittsburgh Pirates, 2023 All-Star. He is a good, if not superb, middle of the rotation guy. 4.19 ERA this past season in 32 starts. He is very durable, at least 159 innings pitched each of the last 4 seasons. Mitch Keller, Pablo Lopez, Edward Cabrera. Who you like?
I like Mitch Keller a lot in this instance. I don't think in the same way that like, it makes sense that the Orioles and the Rays can match up because they're both, teams that see things similarly. I think there's another side of this where like I think the Pirates and probably the Mariners are two teams that, like, you look at the Orioles and them, and you're like, how come you can't make a deal when you guys terribly need hitting and the Orioles terribly need pitching and you have both?
Yep.
Um,
It happened
but
once,
yeah, yeah,
and it
it
worked
feel
out.
yes. So I think there's a world where I think making that trade, like getting somebody like Keller and kind of satisfying that need, that would probably be my pick. I'm not, I think my next move is to throw money at the rotation rather
Right.
than more players. And I think I would be interested to know. I think my answer is Keller, and I would posit to you, like, where would Baz have been in this if we had done this last week?
I think he'd be in this category.
Yeah,
I think he has maybe more upside than any of these three guys because he is younger than all of these guys. I mean, Keller's 30, Pablo Lopez is 30, Edward Cabrera is 28, Baz is 26. But for him, like I said, I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I just think it's
yeah,
interesting too because while I am of the agreement absolutely with you that free agents are free. Like they are
yeah.
not only free to sign anywhere, but they are also do not require, unless they have a comp pick attached to them because they rejected a qualifying offer. They are free to just go out and get. So I'm not of the mind that you should go ahead and throw prospects, continue to throw prospects at the problem here. But it's just an interesting situation because you also have younger guys on this list than you do in free agency. There are the biggest issues with some of the free agents out there is their age. I mean, Ranger Suarez is going to be 30, 31. Framber Valdez is going to be 32. So, to get a young, controllable starting pitcher is better.
And you're also getting them. You're also getting them too. I should add. You're also getting them for when you want to have them. Like, they're going to be making real money in the
Exactly.
second half in like arbitration years, but they're going to be in their prime, and then you're not going to be on the hook for all the years you don't want them.
Exactly. All right. Before we get you out of here, I know you have family time to attend, John. I just want to get your thoughts on 4 quick, not entirely sure bucket starting pitchers. Kodai Senga, 33 years old for the Mets, All-Star 2 years ago in 2023, and then bounced back and forth between the minors and majors this past year. Sandy Alcantara, former ace, just 30 years old, has had Tommy John, didn't look like an ace in 2025 with an ERA over 5. Nick Pivetta, looked like an ace this past season, but didn't look like an ace for any season of his career prior to this. 33 years old from the Padres. And then Chris Bubich coming off a phenomenal season with the Royals at 28 years old, but also major question marks because he had Tommy John in the past, was a reliever when he came back, missed a few months this season with a left rotator cuff strain. Kodai Senga, Sandy Alcantara, Nick Pivetta, Chris Bubich. Anybody?
Senga's always been really interesting to me. I think he's like a fascinating guy if they can get the Mets to pay down some of that. I don't think the Orioles can like go around like hat in hand anymore, based on who owns the team now. But I think that's a fascinating one. I think for the pitchers or for the injured guys, guys who have some kind of relative injury question, like the Orioles can kind of stomach that a little more based on what they've already done, but you'd be putting that uncertainty into a group with you already don't know how many of like you expect Bradish and Wills are going to be limited in some capacity in terms of innings, and adding more uncertainty to the mix feels like the antithesis of what they've been trying to do this whole winter, basically. But it's weird. This is not a good answer. I'm going to give you a bad answer, but like if the Orioles have the chance to get like an Alcantara or like a Bubich, like with the health risk, and they think the price is good and like it's reasonable, then they should do it.
Both those guys have upside.
But I don't think that it would be reasonable for the risk that the team who is trading for them would be taking on. And honestly, because it has to be like, say, I don't know, if like when John Means was like coming off Tommy John, like the Orioles would have wanted a lot for him. And it would have been a bad look if they traded him for less than a lot.
Yeah.
So another team would have had to give up a lot, and they would have been like, well, this guy's been hurt. This guy isn't his best. Like, what are we trading for? And the answer would be like, our best pitcher. So give us that,
right.
Give us that value. And I think that's kind of the sticking point more so than like these guys' actual abilities. Like all these guys would help the Orioles rotation. I think it's just the ability to trade for them.
Exactly. At this point. All right. Well, let us know what you think. I just listed 11 guys. There are probably plenty more that you would like to trade for. I saw some comments, if you're tuning in live on YouTube, X, or Facebook, some comments about Paul Skeens being thrown out there. I'm not sure the the Pirates would be willing to deal him. I think people are just have their ideas of who they'd like to get, and I want to hear your ideas. Write us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and I'll read it out here on the show. John and I will have another episode for you, maybe next week. Hopefully, the Orioles will do something that'll be worth talking about, but we'll have you covered on thebanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months in the meantime. Thanks so much for